Hello, fans. This is Michael Koff with Ghost Ship Hunters, Potter Paranormal, Sirens of the Expanses, and Dirty South Paranormal. I am coming to you today to talk about a trip that I took before I was a paranormal investigator and discuss some of the events that happened that kind of affected me. And this trip took place in 2013 in October, and it was to the Cathar France region, which, for some of you who aren't aware of the Cathars, they were the predecessors of the Knights Templars, and they were in the southern France area prominently. And so let me try and get this a little sturdier. And so I was there for about a couple weeks, I think. And just so you don't think what a great memory I have notes here of the trip so that I can remember the places I went to, and I will try my best not to butcher the names of the areas. The first place we went to was the Hotel Pebre Deal for dinner. Then the next day, we drove to visit the chapel of Mary Magdalene and the Hostellerie La Sebaume. And we drove to the Three Oaks, walking up the Chemin des Rois, the Road of the Kings, to the Cave of Mary Magdalene in Baume Massif. Now, what was interesting is in this cave, you could feel the energy of the land. You could feel the energy of a lot of spiritual and a lot of history there. That there was some stuff taking place there, and also you could feel spirits around. And on the ceiling was a wet spot that, when you took a picture of it, looked like an angel watching over the entrance of the cave. And the inside of the cave was really ornate. And then we went to visit the Basilica Saint Marie Madeleine at the Saint Maximin La Saint Baume, and the pictures and the stained glass and on the walls were really showing a different history and showing how Mary Magdalene came to France and was in France. And for those who may not know the Cathar history of Mary Magdalene, she was the wife of Jesus. And I know some of you may think of that as a controversial topic, and I respect that. And this is the history of the land, and so I'm going to share it as they believe it. And I personally believe she went into Europe, but that aside, it's for you to decide. And so our journey continues. We then went to Lestes Marie de la Mer and the Camargue, and we visited the church dedicated to the N.D. de la Mer. And We saw a black Mary Magdalene statue, and it was said to be the grave or tomb of one of the tombs of Mary Magdalene. Very ornate. The church is right next to the Mediterranean coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and is very simplistic in nature, but also you could tell there was Templar artifacts and designs to it. We then, after lunch, went to our hotel, which was Le Labadeur in Rennes-le-Château, and the following day we went to the source of the mother goddess in Champagne-les-Bains, and we visited the church in Brenec, which is the village of the flowers, and it had a bunch of Templar symbols to it, and was a very beautiful church. Had 2 levels that you could walk through, made of stone, and was really awe-inspiring. We then left the church and we went to go walking through the labyrinth of Nebius, and went to the church, or not church, I'm sorry, went to the castle of the Troubadours in Pouvet. And when we were at the Troubadour Castle, there were several areas of that with tight staircases and a lot of rooms with ornate decoration on the walls. You could feel the energy and history of the location, and you could definitely get a sense of there was more there than meets the eye that was going on. And troubadours were considered musicians, and so they had tapestry of musicians all in this great area, and they also had an armory for protection. And I believe it was in Pouvet that we then went to Limoux, and we visited the Church of Saint Martin. And we went to a lot of churches that had stained glass windows and paintings telling the story of Mary Magdalene in France and in the area. And it was very beautifully done. You could see that they put a lot of care into the locations and into the history. And we then, the next day, we went to the city of Maripois, and we visited the marketplace with the house that was with the sculpted faces on it, which was really fun and very interesting to see. And we went to the cathedral dedicated to Saint Maurice, and then to the Rock Church of Vals, and next to Terrascon-sur-Ariège, and we visited the magical cave of Lombrevs, the largest cave in Europe. And these caves were slippery, so you got to be careful what you wear for footwear, and you want to have long sleeves and pants on just in case. And there is a deep-seated, natural, pure energy that flows through this area. And almost, I would say, revitalizes the soul when you can connect to it. And it is a very magical place with a lot of deep history. And we got to see many statuaries depicted to the telling of the story of Mary Magdalene and Jesus. And the next day we went to Quinlan and we visited Joke's shop at Le Renaissance. And then we went shopping in Cathar, and we went through Coisa to Rennes-les-Bains, east of the Bugarac, and we were admiring the mountain, which was sacred, Mount Bugarac. And there's a lot of history and a lot of connections throughout time of oddities, of what we would consider oddities happening at Bugarac. And so it was really inspiring to see it. And we then went to the Gorge de Galamas with the cave of Mary Magdalene and the Hermitage, and went to St. Paul de Fenouillet and Mori, to the Cathar castles of Carabas and Pe Repretus, visiting the source of the water. So this source water, the story behind it is it's flowing out the side of the mountain, and it is said that when you drink this water, you will find love, and you will be filled with love. And so we all filled water bottle or two with it. I actually brought some back to the States with me. When we left, I kept a large bottle, and it had a sweet taste to it and tasted really fresh from the mountain. You could tell that it was running through the mountain. There's a little tap that you can fill to your heart's desires with. And when we were in the gorge, we went down and we found a church style meeting area in the rocks, and you could tell by how it was made that it was connected to the land, and also how it was hidden, so you could not find it without knowing where it was. So it was designed like on a path through your spiritualism. Now, we then proceeded the next day to the Abbey of St. Paulicarpe, which we then went to the Basilica, the Nd de Massier in Limoux, with its Black Madonna and healing waters for the eyes. And we visited the city of Carcassonne and the Nd du Cross, with its Black Madonna and sacred spring, finally to the 5,000-year-old Dolmen De Fudz. Now, dolmens are what we would consider megalithic structures, and it almost, you had the feeling of this was a project of love and a project that probably, I think, had what we would consider giants as a part of it, because these structures are tall and the stonework is heavy and it's built into the ground. And so it would have taken a lot of care and a lot of knowledge of the land to build this and for it to still stand today, and is quite energizing. And you could tell that there was a lot that they would do to protect it, and you could feel the energy of almost like a shielding around it that would allow only certain energetics to be comfortable there and to understand what's going on. Now, we went then to Allée la Bains and we visited the marketplace. And one of the cool things about La Bains is there was the house of the grandparents of Nostradamus. And Nostradamus, as many of you know, was considered a great seer of his time. He could look into mirrors and see stuff in the future. He wrote many quatrains, which, when people look at today, they can say, wow, this was written over 200 years ago, I believe. And it fits with history that's currently going on. And so that's the amazing thing about the quatrains of Nostradamus. And we went to the palace of the bishop and the beautiful Abbey ruins, and they had beautiful gardens there, and was really beautiful architecture. Even the ruins were pretty. There was the enigmatic church of Saint Saliveri, and from there we walked to Pierre Dressé, which was a sacred standing stone. And then we went back to Les Bains to visit the Galeries des Anges. And when we were there, you were able to walk around and see different paintings and see how they spoke to you. And they were very friendly people and very open to sharing their experiences and their connections to the land and the history. And we then went west to the Indy du Val de Amor in Bellesta, with its black or brown Madonna and its sacred spring, and then to Fontes a source with every half hour rising and falling water, and went on to Montague. And we got to visit the ruins of the castle of Montague with Richard Stanley and Scarlett Amorous, and they guided us up the mountain, and we went on a beautiful pilgrimage up there and got to see the land, and we got to hear many interesting stories from Richard Stanley. And when we were up there, we went to the very top of the castle of Montague, and you can stand on the edge and you can literally see the town 360 degrees, all the land, everything around it, and why it was one of the last strongholds of getting rid of the Cathars that they had a hard time with. Now, this is the evening that a friend and I went exploring, and we went up to Rennes-le-Chateau, and along the way we kept hearing rustling in the trees along the roads. Mind you, this is at night, nobody's out, everyone's asleep, and then we got to a certain point, took a seat, and was resting and just taking in the land, and we start walking towards the entrance to Rennes-le-Chateau when all of a sudden the rustling would pick up, and I started getting an uneasy feeling in my stomach, and so I told my friend that I was with, who's like a brother, that when we got to the gates of the city, we had to turn back because I felt like the guardians of the city and the sacredness of this place, we could not enter there. And so we then came down and we found some Roman ruins of like a bathhouse, possibly, and a stone tower. And we went back to our room. And the next day, we were at the market in Esperanza, which was a lot of fun. And we went to La Pique, Le Pas de la Roque, to Rennes-les-Bains, and we went up to the Bentier, and the place where the river Sals from Sogrin met with the river Bloquet from Bucarac to the Fontaine des Amours. And we then went up to climbing up to La Fauteuil du Diable, which was the seat of Isis, next to the source Le Cerisiel. And we went to the tomb of Husson, where that stood, and Les Capitales on the Camp Grand. And when we were sitting in the seat of Isis, it's a stone chair carved out with symbols on it, and it is a very energy charging seat. And it opens you up to energies, so you have to be careful with it. And at night, my friend and I went up to Rennes-le-Chateau again to see what we would see. And this time, when we walked up the road, there was no rustling in the trees. The guardians had decided that we were okay and that we were prepared enough to enter the city. And we walked around quietly out of respect to the people who live there. And we were looking over the horizon around the city, and you could see strange lights coming from the mountains around the area, and you could see the city, a large city, down at the bottom of the hill that Rennes-le-Chateau sits on. And we were walking around the Tour de Magdalene when my friend went to check on a noise he heard, and I saw a lady in white float by. Now, we found out later that a lady in white can be an ominous omen of death and also a messenger. And so it was obviously a message for me because I'm still here from 2013. And we went, and on the path walking back, we saw two red eyes looking at us from the forest, tree areas, and the bushes around the city. And as we would get closer, the eyes backed off, and we thought nothing of it. And the next day, we actually went into the town during the day to Rennes-le-Chateau, and we got to tour inside the church, see the architect, see the famous statue of Asmodeus, and you could see how everything was laid out to tell a story and to reveal secrets, and if you understood it. And there is the tale of Saunier, who found a fortune there and was able to help with the, I forget what the name of it is, the church in London, the Temple Church in London, with the Sinclairs, and everything was being tied together with the Templars, and many believe he found some of the Templar treasure and was able to save Rennes-le-Chateau. And we went in Rennes-le-Chateau, got to walk around some shops, and everyone was very nice. And we also had a concert from a famous musician named Annie Williams, and that was in the Jardin de Marie. And we got to enjoy a meal and all the Cathar flags that were flying around the area. They have a deep spiritual connection to the land, and it is a very magical place to experience. The energy there is something you truly had to experience. And a funny story I'll share with you of when we were in Carcassonne was my friend and I, who's like my brother, went exploring the town, and we started getting hungry, so we thought we would stop in to grab a quick bite while everybody else was walking around the city and taking in this walled-in city that's like a fortress, castle city, just like you would expect to see in medieval times. And all of a sudden, we were asking what the famous dish was, and they said, oh, it's, I believe it was like sausage and beans. And so we thought, well, that won't take long. So we both ordered it, thinking, let's take in some of the flavor of the city. And we finished eating after it finally arrived and go to regroup with the rest of the tour group, and come to find out they've been looking for us because it took a very long time to get your food there. And so lesson learned there was, in France, be careful ordering food in restaurants because they do not do fast food like we're used to. And everybody was waiting for us to have our cheese and bread snack and go on to our next location. It was a truly magical experience experiencing Cathar France. I highly recommend, if you are a truth seeker or someone who likes to feel energies and experience energies and sacredness, that this area of France is highly recommended to see and experience. I recommend using a guide because some of the areas are very unique and hard to get into. And also, one thing we learned was to carry euros because there's not a lot of places to convert dollars to euros. And in France, they do prefer euros. So keep that in mind when you go to visit. And I hope that this video about my experience in Cathar France either inspires you to look into Cathar France region and its history or to go and visit it. I hope you all enjoyed this little video about my experience in France, and I look forward to catching you on my next adventure, and hope everybody has blessed adventures in their own life. See you guys on the next one.